Wealthy triplets rejected all the maids' dishes until they saw this rural girl food. Before we dive into this breathtaking story, leave a comment below telling us which city and country you're watching us from. Stay tuned until the end. A tasteless mansion. In the huge mansion surrounded by high walls and perfectly manicured gardens, lived the millionaire triplets, Gail, Theo, and Enzo. Since they were little, they were spoiled with everything money could buy. Imported toys, designer clothes, and the best chefs in the country at their disposal. However, the older they grew, the more arrogant they became. Their parents, always absent, thought that comfort and luxury were enough to raise them. The cooks in the house were replaced as if they were disposable cutlery. None of them stayed for more than a week. All it took was one dish that didn't please the boys' palates, and she was fired without any ceremony. The boys made fun of the seasonings, the presentation of the dishes, and even imitated the accents of the women who came from the countryside or other regions. Cruelty was part of the game. The mansion's housekeeper, Mrs. Clotilde, no longer knew what to do. Even though she was strict, she could see that the boys had become little tyrants. They refused breakfast, demanded exotic menus for lunch, and refused dinner if the dessert wasn't up to par. The oldest, by a few minutes, Gail, always took the lead in making decisions. Theo and Enzo followed suit like rude copies. In that marble and silver environment, there was no human warmth. Meals were served by silent waiters with steaming, expensive dishes that ended up in the trash. The kitchen became a battlefield, and no one wanted to work there anymore. But on the horizon, something different was approaching. Something that would come from simplicity, from the earth, and from a strength that none of the three had ever known. The last attempt. With yet another cook leaving the house in a hurry, Mrs. Clotilde gathered the employees and informed them that if no one suggested a solution, a chef from a French restaurant would be hired for a fortune. There would be staff cuts to pay the new salary. A heavy silence hung over them until Zedas Cuves, a gardener for decades, suggested someone unexpected, his niece from the countryside. Clotilde hesitated. A humble peasant girl cooking for the most difficult triplets in the country? It was almost comical, but with no other options and pressured by her distant bosses, she decided to accept. She asked Zay to bring her over the weekend. According to him, the girl was good with the pan, had blessed hands and a seasoning that reminded her of Grandma's house. Food with soul, he said with tears in his eyes. The following Saturday, an old pickup truck quietly pulled into the service entrance. A simple young woman got out, her skin golden from the sun, her eyes alert, and a scarf covering her hair. Her name was Luna. She was carrying a basket of roots, free-range eggs, fresh herbs, and a shy, almost suspicious smile. The contrast between her and the gleaming stainless steel kitchen was immediate. Clotilde took her to the pantry and asked her to prepare something quick, just for evaluation. Luna washed her hands, looked around, and took a deep breath. There was nothing familiar there, but there was courage in her chest. In less than an hour, an intense smell of real food spread through the mansion, reaching even the boys' floor. They wrinkled their noses in curiosity. This was not what they were used to. The first contempt in the dining room, the triplets looked at the plate with suspicion. Fluffy rice with golden garlic, chicken stew with fresh vegetables, and a simple but aromatic farofa. They looked at each other as if it were a joke. Theo was the first to push the plate away. "This looks like farm food, Clotilde," he mocked. Enzo grimaced, took a spoonful of the farofa, and dropped it back on the plate with disdain. Gail didn't even touch his cutlery. He stared at Luna, who was standing next to the door, and said, "Do you really think we're going to eat that? This isn't a farm." The sentence cut through the air like a blade. Luna didn't respond. She stood firm, even though her heart was aching. She was used to superior looks, but not to that kind of childish arrogance. Clotilde tried to intervene, but the boys left the table with contempt. They left the food untouched. Luna cleared the plates without saying a word. In the kitchen, she sat for a few minutes and took a deep breath. She didn't cry, but she felt a familiar pain. Her mother had often said that, when the soul of the food is ignored, the problem is not in the dish, but in the one who tastes it. That night, Zay tried to comfort her. He said it had been like that with all the others and that she shouldn't be upset. But Luna wasn't like the others. She didn't just want to impress, she wanted to touch hearts. And for some reason she felt she needed to do something more for those three boys lost amidst the gold and the emptiness. The missing memory. While dinner was being ignored, Luna took advantage of the early morning to prepare a special dish. She chose ingredients that she had brought from the farm: fresh corn, artisanal cheese, basil leaves, a piece of cured pork, and some spices that she learned to use from her grandmother. She didn't follow recipes. She followed her memory, the smells of her childhood, the gestures of the family gathered together. At dawn, the kitchen was filled with an aroma that did not come from luxurious dishes, but from warmth and history. Clotilde, upon smelling it, went downstairs, still in her nightgown, and took a spoonful. Her eyes filled with tears, and she did not understand why. It was just food. But something about that combination triggered memories of her childhood, of a time when there was still affection at the table. Luna didn't expect miracles. She simply left the dishes ready before the children woke up. This time, without protocol, without waiters. She left the pots on the table along with handwritten notes like her grandmother used to do. Eat when you're hungry. You can have another helping. There's more in the pot. Good morning, sweetheart. And she left, returning to the garden to help her uncle. When the triplets got off the table, they were initially surprised by the shape of the table. But the smell was so different from anything they had ever smelled that they served themselves in silence. They didn't comment. They didn't make fun. They just ate. Little by little, without understanding, they began to repeat the dish, tasting the farofa along with the creamed corn. At that moment, something inside them, well hidden, began to move. The unprecedented silence. Clotilde, watching from afar, could hardly believe what she was seeing. For the first time in months, the boys were eating in silence. There was no forced laughter, complaints, or shows of disdain. Just spoons banging on plates and discreet glances at each other, as if trying to understand what was happening. Theo was the first to speak, with his mouth still full. "Is there more of this?" Gail looked at the tickets on the table and said nothing. He picked up one of them, the one that said, "Good morning, sweetheart," and folded it carefully, as if it were something valuable. Enzo simply repeated the dish without a word. This was more than food. It was a memory they didn't know they had. It was the absence of their parents filled with an invisible gesture. In the kitchen, Luna was silently washing dishes. She knew the aroma had reached the boys, but she wasn't expecting any miracles. For her, that was what cooking was all about, doing the right thing, even without applause. She didn't know that, at that moment, the three brothers were coming up the stairs looking for her, curious to know who that invisible cook was. When they arrived, they came face to face with Luna carrying a basin of clothes to wash. She looked at them calmly. No bow, no apology, only mutual respect. Gail tried to say something, but it was Theo who spoke first. "Were you the one who did that thing with the corn?" Luna nodded. "Yes, but I still have to improve. You didn't like it yesterday." And that was when the first real smile was born. A new taste. In the following days, the mansion seemed to breathe differently. Luna began to cook freely, without imposed menus, using only what she had brought and what she found at the local market. The boys curiously stopped asking for French dishes or elaborate pastas. They began to ask what the dish of the day would be. Something changed in them, not in their stomachs, but in their chests. Luna, without forcing ties, began to notice nuances that no one else saw. Gale, although bossy, looked at his brothers as if he wanted to protect them. Theo had a more sensitive manner, hidden under a layer of sarcasm. Enzo was observant and asked strange questions about ingredients and smells. They were still arrogant at times, but something was slowly breaking down. Zay from the garden laughed to himself when he saw the scene. "I told you she had the hand of a saint," he muttered as he watered the plants. Clotilde also softened. She began to eat with pleasure again, something she had not done for years. The mansion was no longer just a symbol of cold wealth, but was beginning to become a real home. All thanks to the silent power of a simple pot, but there was still much to come. Luna was keeping a secret about her origins, something that could change the course of their lives. And the triplets, without knowing it, were more connected to her than they could ever imagine. The first real connection. The next morning, Gale appeared in the kitchen earlier than usual. He sat on the high stool and watched Luna chop onions. He said nothing for a while, then asked if she knew how to make corn cake like the ones on Grandma's farm. Luna replied matter-of-factly, "If you describe the smell, I'll make it." Theo and Enzo arrived soon after, bringing with them eggs collected from the chicken coop in the back, something they had never done in their lives. Luna found it funny but thanked them. Together they began to prepare the most unusual breakfast the mansion had ever seen. An improvised cornbread, made by 6 hands, complete with mess on the counter and guilt-free laughter. That simple moment was like a ray of light in a structure built on pride. The boys felt useful for the first time. Luna didn't treat them like princes, but like ordinary boys. And that, for them, was liberating. They felt seen, not for what they had, but for who they were. Late in the morning, the cake was still warm when the 3 of them took pieces to Clotilde and Zay. The gardener, moved, said that it was the same flavor as in the past. The boys didn't understand, but they smiled. What they didn't know was that that flavor also carried a blood link, and this secret would soon come to light. The portrait in the drawer. While Luna was organizing the kitchen utensils, she found a forgotten drawer with old photos of her bosses. Among them, one portrait caught her attention. A young woman with sweet eyes, holding a baby in a garden similar to the one in the mansion. Next to it, there was a folded note with handwriting faded by time. Something about that image moved her, as if there was an unconscious recognition. Clotilde appeared at the time and, upon seeing the photo in someone else's hands, quickly took it. She simply said that it was not important, and that it should not be there. The housekeeper seemed uncomfortable and her gaze hardened for a moment. Luna politely apologized but kept every detail of that image in her memory. There was something there that time could not erase. For lunch that day, Luna prepared a typical dish from her childhood, feijoa tropeira with pork rinds and sauté kale. The boys ate it enthusiastically, as if something was awakening inside them with each bite. It was more than just flavor. It was a sense of belonging that they couldn't name. For the first time, they asked how Luna learned to cook that way. Luna talked about her upbringing with her grandmother in a small village in the countryside. She explained that she had never met her parents, only that she had heard that her mother had left her when she was a baby for bigger reasons. As she spoke, Clotilde listened from the doorway with a closed expression. At that moment, something became clear to her. The past was about to knock on the family's door, and there was no way to stop it. The hidden letter. The next morning, driven by restlessness, Clotilde rummaged through her own dresser. From inside an envelope hidden under old clothes, she took out a handwritten letter. It was from the triplets' mother, written shortly before the birth, revealing something that had never been given to her husband. The woman said that she was pregnant with 4 children, but that one of them had been born unconscious and had been declared dead by the hospital, without her having time to see him. Clotilde had always known that the story was not well told. Having worked in the house since before the boys were born, he remembered the lady's desperation and the haste with which everything was hushed up. She had discreetly investigated and discovered that the baby had been delivered to a midwife in the countryside, but he had never had the courage to reveal anything. Now, seeing Luna, the doubt grew like a silent fire. Meanwhile, the triplets, who were growing closer to Luna, began to question aspects of their own family. Gail commented that the house had always been too quiet, and Theo confessed that he had never felt truly loved by his parents. Enzo, the most introspective, observed Luna as if he were seeing a forgotten part of himself. Without understanding why, they felt more whole when she was around. Late in the afternoon, Clotilde sat down with Zay in the backyard and told him everything. The old gardener was shocked. He remembered the midwife who had helped Luna when she was a baby, and her mother's disappearance soon after. They began to put together the pieces of a puzzle that pointed to something unthinkable. Luna could be the triplets' lost sister, a truth that, if confirmed, would change everything. The DNA of destiny. Without telling their bosses, Clotilde and Zay decided to take action. They discreetly collected objects belonging to Luna and the boys for a DNA test. They used strands of hair and used brushes, sending the material to a private laboratory with the help of a doctor who was a friend of the village. The process was confidential and delicate, but they both knew that the truth had to come out before the family made another mistake. While they waited for the results, Luna continued her routine without suspecting anything. But she felt that something had changed in Clotilde's gaze, who now treated her with more kindness and a certain restrained reverence. The boys, in turn, were increasingly involved. They began to help with the meals, participate in the preparation, and even tell jokes at the table. For the first time, the mansion had a homely feel. One rainy afternoon, the 4 of them were sitting on the living room floor, playing cards and laughing out loud. No adult had taught them this. It was Luna, with her simplicity and lack of judgment, who made them allow themselves to play. Gale, who always acted like a leader, finally relaxed. Theo laughed with his nose dirty with flour. Enzo, without realizing it, called Luna Lou, as if she were already part of the family. Clotilde watched them from the stairs, tears in her eyes. The result would soon come, and the doubt that had been eating away at her for years could finally be resolved. But with the truth would also come fear. How would the boy's parents react upon learning that there was a forgotten daughter in the countryside, living as a simple cook? The mansion, in short, was about to be shaken for good. The enveloped truth. 2 days later, the envelope arrived in the hands of a discreet motorcycle courier. Clotilde locked herself in her room, sat in the armchair where her former boss used to read, and opened the report with trembling hands. The result was unquestionable. Total genetic compatibility. Luna was, in fact, the Triplets' sister. The child who had been presumed dead had survived, growing up far from everything. But blood spoke loudly. For minutes, Clotilde remained motionless, trying to process the weight of what she knew. She felt guilty for not having acted sooner, but also grateful for having had time to see the connection develop naturally between the brothers. She needed to decide how to tell them. She didn't want the revelation to destroy what had been built with so much effort, but she also couldn't hide it forever. He called Zay, and together they discussed the best way forward. They came to the conclusion that the boys should know first. They deserved to understand before their parents found out and possibly reacted with contempt or coldness. They knew that the couple had never shown any real interest in their children, much less in a daughter raised outside the standards of high society. Clotilde gathered the triplets in the house's library, and with a heavy heart, told them the truth. She showed them the report, told them the story of their mother, the night of the birth, and the disappearance of the fourth baby. At first they thought it was a bad joke, but when they saw the documents, the penny dropped. Enzo was the first to cry. Theo, in shock, simply murmured, "Lou is our sister." The pain of silence. For hours, the triplets remained silent, each dealing with the information in their own way. Gale withdrew into himself, pacing back and forth, visibly disturbed. Theo tried to rationalize everything, saying it was impossible, that they had been deceived. Enzo, on the other hand, wanted to tell Luna everything immediately, but Clotilde stopped them, asking them to be calm and sensitive. They realized that despite the joy of discovering their sister, there was also a burden, that of understanding the abandonment, the mistake of their own parents, the injustice of a life separated from birth. Theo was outraged, saying that he would never trust his mother again. Gale suggested that they wait for the right moment to tell Luna everything, in the right way. Enzo just kept saying that she needed to know right away. Meanwhile, Luna felt a sense of unease in the air. She noticed that the boys were quieter, more tense, as if they were hiding something. She tried not to interfere, but the change was clear. Even so, she continued with her routine, cooking, cleaning, and exchanging pleasantries with the staff. Without knowing it, her life was about to change completely. That night, Luna went up to the guest room with a knot in her stomach. She had the feeling that something very big was about to happen. She looked out the window, saw the city lights in the distance, and thought of her grandmother, who always said that destiny has curious ways of reuniting what time separated. She had no idea that the next day she would hear the truth that would change her name, her story, and her family. The revelation. The next morning, the boys decided to take action. They gathered Luna in the living room, next to Clotilde and Zay. Gale was direct. He said they had something important to tell. Luna frowned but remained attentive. Theo showed the report. Enzo explained the story of the birth, and Clotilde filled in the details she knew. When they finished, silence filled the room. Luna didn't react right away. Her face was expressionless, her eyes fixed on the paper in front of her. Inside, she was in turmoil. It was as if everything she believed in had been turned upside down. The pieces that had never fit together in her childhood now made sense. Her mother's absence, her rejection, the feeling that something was always missing. Now she knew what it was. Her real family had been in front of her all along. She stood up, walked to the garden, and stood there, in silence. The boys followed her from a distance, respecting the moment. It was not time for parties or hugs. It was time to respect the pain of the reunion. Luna, after long minutes, turned to them and said, "If it is true, then let me decide if I want to be your sister. Because blood is not everything. Attitude is what made me like you. Enzo was the first to approach and carefully held his hand. Theo apologized for everything they had done before. Gale, for the first time, lowered his head and said he didn't know how to make amends, but he wanted to try. Luna, with tears in her eyes, hugged the three of them at once. She didn't know what would happen from then on, but she knew one thing. Love, like good food, needs to be prepared with truth. A new beginning. From that morning on, everything changed. Luna was officially introduced as part of the family to all the staff, and the boys demanded that she leave the servants' wing and occupy one of the main bedrooms. Clotilde arranged everything carefully, as if she were preparing an altar. Luna hesitated at first, but accepted, understanding that to refuse would be to return to a role that was never hers. The triplets' parents were informed by letter and decided to come to the mansion. The visit was scheduled for the next few days, and everyone was preparing for what could be a confrontation. The boys were determined. If their parents did not accept Luna, they would find a way to protect her themselves. Enzo even said that, if necessary, they would leave the mansion and build something new together. Meanwhile, Luna continued cooking. Now for pleasure, not obligation. The dishes she prepared became part of a notebook that her siblings began to put together with her. The family book, with recipes, memories, and handwritten notes. It was a way to immortalize the new story they were building. The right way, without masks. The reunion of blood had only been the beginning. The real challenge would be to face the world with this new truth. And that would begin soon, with the arrival of those who had chosen to forget a piece of their family. But now Luna was no longer alone, and neither were the triplets. The table finally had all the places filled. The arrival of the parents. The imported black car parked in front of the mansion in heavy silence. The triplets' parents got out with a rigid posture, accompanied by a discreet aide. The father, austere and calculating, examined the house as if nothing there belonged to him emotionally. The mother, always impeccable, pretended to be calm, but her eyes betrayed discomfort. They had read Clotilde's letter, but they did not believe that it was possible. They were received coldly by their children. The three of them, together, informed them that they wanted to have a serious conversation. Luna watched from afar, her heart racing. Clotilde had advised her not to confront them immediately. It was necessary to know how willing they were to acknowledge their past. Their father began by questioning the veracity of the DNA test, claiming that it could all be a setup. Gale took the lead and presented the report, followed by a firm statement. She is our sister, and we want you and me to recognize that. The father did not respond immediately. The mother, seeing Luna approaching, turned pale. She recognized the features, the similarity in their eyes, and above all felt the weight of what she had hidden for so many years. Facing her lost daughter was more than a surprise. It was a silent moral judgment. Luna, with a firm but calm voice, simply said, "I didn't come here to take anything from you. I'm just trying to understand why my life was different." Her mother cried. Her father, trying to maintain control, simply stepped away and asked for time. The meeting ended without hugs, without promises. But Luna knew, sometimes the absence of a negative was already a beginning. For the first time, that family's empire was shaking because of something real. Love. The impasse of pride. The following days were tense. The parents remained in the house, avoiding direct contact with Luna, while the triplets took turns protecting her and pressuring them to take action. Clotilde tried to maintain order, but even the staff realized that something more important than luxury and routine was at stake. The mansion was at war between truth and pride. The boy's father tried to convince them that Luna was a threat to their wealth, insinuating that he might want something more. That's when Gail, outraged, replied that if it was for money, they would have given up everything. He said that Luna was already richer than everyone there because of something none of them knew: integrity. The father didn't respond. He just locked himself in the office. The mother, in silence, began to observe Luna discreetly. She saw in her the gestures of the daughter she had never had the courage to raise. She began to realize that the hospital's decision to declare the child without a chance was the biggest mistake of her life. Deep down, she felt that now she was paying the price for having agreed to keep quiet. One night he left a letter in Luna's room, asking for forgiveness, and saying that if he could go back, he would do everything differently. Luna read the letter and cried, but she didn't seek revenge. She knew that forgiveness can't be begged for. It comes in the time of the one who suffered. And hers was still maturing. Even so, she decided not to harbor resentment. She wanted to move on, to build something from what they had there, and not repeat the mistakes of those who came before. She knew that pain can contaminate generations, but it can also heal when the truth is served with courage. The Meal of Courage. One Sunday morning, Luna prepared the biggest banquet she had ever had in her life. There were dishes from the countryside, desserts from her childhood, and even new recipes created with the boys. It was a way of honoring the new phase, without expecting recognition. The table was set in the garden under the old trees, and everyone was invited, including the parents, who reluctantly agreed to sit down. During lunch, silence reigned. The triplets tried to make conversation, but their parents remained distant. Luna, however, continued to serve everyone with the same care, without exception. There was no pressure, only generosity. At one point, her mother gave a shy compliment about the seasoning of the rice. It was the first crack in the ice wall. Zay, always discreet, told a story about when he helped the midwife in the village save a baby. He spoke without mentioning names, but the mother's gaze fell on her plate. It was the past poking at her conscience. Luna then simply said, "Food heals more than it seems." That was when Enzo, with tears in his eyes, stood up and raised a toast to his sister. He said that she had not only saved their meals, she had saved their lives. The mother couldn't take it anymore. She cried at the table. The father, still cold, excused himself and left. But that day, a bridge was built. And, like every bridge, it starts with the first step. Luna realized that it wasn't about defeating them, but rather showing that there was a new path. And deep down, that was what made her story stronger than any inheritance. The silent agreement. In the days that followed, her relationship with her mother improved subtly. They began to talk little by little in short bursts and almost always around the kitchen. The woman who had always told her to shut up now listened. Luna, in turn, spoke only when necessary. She knew that time demands sincerity. The wound did not heal easily, but living together eased the burden. The father remained emotionally absent, keeping his distance and treating everything as an administrative problem. He tried to convince his wife to solve the situation with money, but she refused. She said that the debt they owed Luna could not be paid with figures. For the first time, He heard something from his wife that sounded like confrontation. His silence said it all. Luna kept her place in the house, no longer as a maid, but as someone who had the right to occupy her own story. The boys included her in everything: trips, events, even in the decisions of the family foundation they created together. More than brotherhood, there was admiration. The bond they built could not be explained by blood, but by daily choices. In practice, Luna didn't want to change her surname or claim inheritance. She just wanted respect, memory, and truth. It was more than many people can achieve in a lifetime, and most importantly, she wanted to continue being who she had always been. Simple, strong, and in control of her own destiny. Now, finally, recognized. The final decision. The day of her parents' departure arrived. Mom called Luna for one last breakfast. They were alone. She asked for forgiveness more firmly, acknowledged that she had made a mistake, that she had been weak, and that she was not ready to be the mother of 4 children. She said that she had thought about her every day since she was in the hospital. Luna listened without interrupting, with teary eyes but a calm demeanor. She said she accepted forgiveness, but she would not forget. That some wounds heal, but leave marks to remind us of who we are. Her mother understood. She was not looking for complete redemption, just a possible new beginning. Luna gave her a copy of the family book, now with the first recipe signed by her own mother. A cheese bread that they had learned together 2 days before. The father, outside, simply waved goodbye. There was no hug, no words. But something in his eyes indicated that even though he was silent, he had understood. Maybe he would never say it. Maybe he would never show it. But Luna's presence had cracked the ice of decades of emotional silence. And that, in itself, was already a revolution. With her parents gone, Luna took a deep breath. The mansion was now a new place. The kitchen was once again a sacred space, where memories mixed with aromas. Her brothers treated her as an equal, and life, finally, was served with all the flavors that love can offer. The recipe for new life months passed. The foundation created by the Triplets grew, and Luna became one of the leaders of the food inclusion project in poor communities. She taught people how to cook with affection, simplicity, and roots. Her story spread, inspiring people to reconnect with their origins. The girl who was born forgotten became a national example. The mansion also changed. It became a venue for cultural events with the kitchen open to the public on special occasions. Luna hosted community lunches. The siblings shared tasks as equals, luxury blended with humility in an organic way. It was as if everything finally made sense. Mom started visiting frequently. Dad, little by little, started getting closer. One day he sat down at the table and ordered some feijão tropeiro. He ate it quietly. When he finished, he simply said, "Now I understand why this food changed my children." That was all. But it was enough for Luna to smile sincerely for the first time in front of him. The family story was far from perfect. But now, around that table, there was something that had never existed before. Truth. And it was truth that brought everyone the rarest dish of all: reconciliation. The complete table, Outcome plus CTA. Today, when Luna is asked what the secret to her change was, she answers simply, "It was the food, yes, but it was what was inside her. It was patience, the courage not to hate, the choice to remain true when everything around her was appearance. She didn't want to overthrow an empire. She wanted to serve love. And the empire bowed down on its own." The brothers grew up as different men. They learned that being rich is not about money, but about empathy. Their mother, now a grandmother, is a present figure. And their father, although still reserved, never stopped showing up on Sundays. Luna remains the same, feet on the ground, heart full and spoon in hand. If you've come this far, it's because this story touched you in some way. And if it did, don't keep it to yourself. Share it. Subscribe to the channel, activate the bell, and come join us at this table. Because here, every story has flavor, and the next one could be yours. Subscribe now, and don't miss the next story that will touch your heart. Because on our channel, every life has a spice that deserves to be told.